They said they wanted me there. Swore up and down it wouldn't be the same without me. Fly out, Grandma, they said. We want you here for Thanksgiving. So I did. I packed the pie dish. I packed my cardigan. I packed every ounce of softness I had left. And then I waited. I was at Gate 3A of Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, standing beneath the arrival sign with my wheeled suitcase beside me, coat folded neatly over one arm. People bustled past with flowers, balloons, little kids holding signs. Some were hugging, some were crying. All of them were being claimed. I stood like a misplaced package. The flight had landed 42 minutes ago. I had checked. Twice. I had also reread the text from my daughter-in-law 3 times. We'll be there. Kids can't wait to see you. Followed by a heart emoji. I had sent a reply. Flight lands at 3:10. Can't wait to hug everyone. No answer. I kept my coat folded because it was warm inside. I didn't sit down because it felt like once I sat, I'd be giving up. Giving in. I didn't want to look like a woman who had been forgotten. At some point, my phone buzzed. Not a call. Not even a text. A notification. From social media. My heart beat faster. Not because I cared about those things, but because sometimes it's where my family posts pictures before they remember to call me. I opened the app. There they were. All of them. My son Greg in the navy sweater I sent last year. His wife Madeline, smiling big and tan like always. The kids, Elliot and Ruby, crowded around a table with candles, turkey, mashed potatoes. A pie that wasn't mine. All of them holding up glasses in a toast. The caption, "Full house, full hearts. Happy Thanksgiving from our family to yours." My eyes skimmed the frame once more. There was no mistake. There was no space for me at that table. I didn't cry. Not then. I just turned around, pulled my coat on, and started walking. Out of the terminal, past the taxis, past the shuttle signs. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't be waiting for them to remember me. 3 days before my flight, Greg called. That alone should have tipped me off. My son doesn't usually call, not unless there's a birthday, a bill, or a reason. But this time, his voice was syrupy smooth, overly cheerful. "Hey, Mom, you doing anything for Thanksgiving?" I told him I was planning to stay home, roast a small chicken, maybe bake a pie if my hands cooperated, watch an old movie. "Nothing fancy," I said, "just me and the radio." He paused for a moment, like he was calculating something. "Well," he said, "the kids were asking about you. Thought maybe you'd like to come here this year. Everyone will be together. It wouldn't feel right without you." That part, the wouldn't feel right without you, it did something to me. It's been a long time since I've felt truly wanted anywhere. Needed, yes. Called on, depended on, but not wanted. There's a difference. So I said yes. I said I'd find a flight. Greg didn't offer to book it or reimburse me, and I didn't ask. I still had the envelope with the Christmas money I'd tucked away for emergencies. I thought this qualified. After we hung up, I stared at the phone a while, fingers still curled. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt excited. Not worried or anxious or obligated, just genuinely excited. The last time someone had invited me without adding a request for something. It had been years. I booked the ticket that evening, found a nonstop on sale. I even paid the extra $12 to choose a seat with more legroom. Silly, maybe, but I figured if I was going to travel halfway across the country, I might as well do it with a little comfort. The next day, I went shopping. Not just for gifts, though I did pick up 2 books for the kids and a box of dark chocolate truffles Madeline used to like. No, I also bought something for myself. A new cardigan, navy blue, soft wool, the kind that drapes just right at the hips and makes you feel like maybe you belong in the picture too. I packed 3 days ahead, checked the weather in Minneapolis, set my heating to low, took the trash out early. I didn't tell my bridge group I was leaving. They'd only ask too many questions. And maybe a part of me didn't want to jinx it. It had been so long since someone had said, "Come, we want you here." I flew out on Thanksgiving morning. The airport was crowded, full of people with rolling bags, headphones, pillows shaped like animals. I smiled at a baby across the aisle, shared a look with another older woman reading a paperback, both of us with our hands in our laps, both with stories unspoken. When the plane landed, I smoothed down my skirt and brushed crumbs off my lap. I had brought my good shoes, the black ones with a tiny heel. I wanted to look like the kind of woman you invite. And I believed I was, until I wasn't. The walk from baggage claim to the exit felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the weight of the suitcase, maybe the weight of something else entirely. I rolled my bag past the coffee kiosks, the families reuniting, the young woman crying with joy into her boyfriend's shoulder. I didn't feel bitter then, just displaced. Like someone had hit pause on me while the rest of the world continued in motion. Outside, the sky was gray with that dull Midwestern light that makes even the air feel heavy. My phone was still quiet. No texts, no missed calls. I checked the time again, 3:54 p.m. Thanksgiving dinner probably wouldn't start until 5 or 6. Maybe they were busy. Maybe the kids were being wild, or the turkey needed basting. There were a dozen reasons, all of them harmless. But even harmless reasons sting when you're standing alone at arrivals. I waited on the curb another 20 minutes before my knees began to protest. I sat on a bench. I watched strangers climb into cars that knew their names. I watched a woman in a puffy jacket bring her mother-in-law a hot chocolate and a hug. The mother-in-law looked older than me. That hug, brief, tight, real, landed right in the hollow part of my chest. At some point, I tried calling. Greg didn't pick up. I left a message. Said I'd landed. Said I was at the usual pickup point, outside door B, under the sign with the airplane on it. Said I hoped everything was okay and that I'd wait a little longer. But I already knew. I knew before I opened the app again. Before the photo loaded. Before I saw the cranberry sauce and the long wooden table and the caption about hearts being full. It wasn't the first time I'd been forgotten. But it was the first time I'd let myself admit that's what it was. I stood up, dusted off my coat, and pulled the suitcase behind me. No cab, no Uber, just me and the sidewalk. A man pushing a stroller offered a tired smile. I nodded back. Funny how in airports or outside them, you can sometimes feel more seen by strangers than your own blood. It was nearly 5 by then. The air had turned sharper, the kind of chill that slides under your collar and asks, "What now?" I didn't answer, just kept walking. My shoes weren't made for this much pavement, but I didn't stop. About a half-mile out, just past a car rental return, I saw it. A squat little building with a neon sign that said, Tina's Diner. The eye flickered in and out. The windows were fogged up from the warmth inside. Someone had taped paper turkeys to the glass. I went in. The bell above the door jingled. Inside, the diner smelled like hot grease and cinnamon. Vinyl booths, yellowed menus, a counter with cracked stools. There were maybe 6 people inside. A man in a UPS jacket. An older couple eating in silence. A waitress with a short ponytail who looked up when I entered and said, "Happy Thanksgiving, hun." "Same to you," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. I picked a booth near the window, slid in. The seat was warm, the table was clean. I pulled off my coat. Kitchen's slow today, the waitress said as she handed me a menu. But we've got turkey and pie. Pie sounds good, I said. What kind? She grinned. Pumpkin, pecan, or key lime? Pumpkin, and some tea, please. You got it. I looked out the window while I waited. My suitcase sat beside me, an obedient little dog. My phone, face down on the table, vibrated once. I didn't flip it over. The pie came. It was warm, with a dollop of whipped cream that leaned a little. The tea was strong and slightly bitter, just the way I like it. I took a bite, then another. It was the best piece of pie I'd had in years. Maybe not because of the spices or the crust. Maybe because, for once, I hadn't made it for anyone else. I ate slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't scroll. I didn't wait for anyone to show up and tell me it was all a misunderstanding. They weren't coming. Not today. Maybe not ever. And still, there I was. Whole. Breathing. Sitting at a booth under paper turkeys, letting the heat return to my fingers. When the waitress brought the check, she asked, "Want another slice to go?" I thought about it for a moment. Then I nodded. Yes. For later. She winked. Best decision you'll make all day. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because she was right. The air bit sharper as I stepped back outside. The little white bag with my second slice of pie dangled from one hand, and my suitcase rolled behind me with a soft, plastic rattle. I didn't have a plan. No hotel booked. No one waiting. But somehow I didn't feel lost. Not exactly. There's a kind of peace that comes when you finally stop expecting the people who hurt you to fix it. The wind picked up as I walked. It wasn't far to the nearest budget motel. I'd seen the sign while trudging from the airport, Valley Inn, weekly rates available. Nothing fancy. A square, low-slung building with beige paint and a vending machine by the front door. But it had lights on, and right now, that was enough. Inside the lobby, a man behind the counter was watching a football game on a tiny TV. He glanced up when I entered, his face a map of boredom and fryer grease. Need a room? Yes, just for one night, I said. Single? I looked down at myself. My good shoes were scuffed from the walk. My cardigan smelled faintly of airplane. I nodded. Single. He slid a form across the counter. ID and card. I handed them over. While he typed, I glanced at the TV. Some team in red and gold was losing badly. The man didn't seem to care. Room 114, he said, sliding me a key on a flimsy ring. End of the row. I took it, thanked him, and wheeled my suitcase down the sidewalk. The room was just what I expected. 2 lamps with mismatched shades, a bedspread patterned in muted browns, a television older than both my children. But it was warm. It had a working heater and a surprisingly clean bathroom. I peeled off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. My feet ached. My back ached more. But my heart, the part that should have been shattered, felt oddly intact. I stared at the phone for a long time before turning it back over. 3 missed calls from Greg, 2 from Madeline, a single text. Mom, where are you? No apology, no explanation, just confusion, as if I had disappeared, as if I were the one who forgot to show up. I didn't reply. Instead, I unzipped my suitcase, took out my notebook, the one I use for grocery lists and thoughts I never say out loud, and wrote something on a fresh page. I am not spare. I am not extra. I am not a side dish at someone else's table. I stared at the sentence a long time. Then I underlined it. I could have cried. A year ago, 5 years ago, I would have. But tonight the tears wouldn't come. What came instead was an odd clarity, like stepping into cold water. Shocking, but clean. It wasn't just about this dinner or the airport. It was the years that led up to it, the birthdays they skipped, the voicemails left unanswered, the last-minute invitations that always sounded like obligations, never joy. I remembered Christmas 2 years ago when Madeline called and said, "We'd love to have you over, if it's not too much trouble getting here." That pause in her voice, the way she said, "if." I made them a ham. I took the bus. I remembered Greg's 40th birthday. I sent him a leather wallet with his initials engraved. He sent back a group text that said, "Thanks for the gifts, everyone." I remembered Ruby's school play, how I'd found the live stream myself and watched on my little laptop with a glass of wine and a lump in my throat. She didn't know I was watching. Nobody mentioned it. And still, I kept showing up. Until today. Maybe it takes standing on the curb alone in a different city to see the shape of what's been there all along. I wasn't part of their life. I was an accessory. A convenience. A placeholder for when they needed to remember their better selves. I looked around the motel room. Ugly, honest, functional. It was the most honest place I'd been in years. I got up, made myself a cup of motel tea using the plastic coffee machine, and sat cross-legged on the bed with my second slice of pie. No china plate, no linen napkin, just a white paper bag and a plastic fork. And yet, it tasted like something I'd earned. The motel room's ceiling had a hairline crack that ran above the bed like a road map. I stared at it while the heater wheezed and kicked. Outside, I could hear the wind scraping at the siding and the occasional engine rumble from the freeway nearby. A man 2 rooms over was coughing, deep, wet, miserable. Somewhere, a toilet flushed. It wasn't a peaceful night, but it was an honest one. Around 2 a.m., I finally drifted off, the scratchy blanket pulled up to my chin, my notebook still open on the nightstand. I slept in the clothes I'd arrived in, too tired to change, too wary to unpack again. In the morning, I woke before the sun. It's a habit I never lost. Even after retirement, my body insists on being useful by 6 cows. I made another cup of weak coffee from the in-room machine and watched the sky lighten through the blinds. The pie was gone. The tea, too. But the quiet stayed. At 7:12, my phone buzzed. "Mom, I'm so sorry. There was confusion with the pickup. We thought your flight was tomorrow. Can you come to the house today? The kids really want to see you." Greg. No explanation for the photo. No mention of the dinner. No apology for posting a Thanksgiving without me in it. Just confusion. And, "Can you?" I stared at the message, then set the phone down. I didn't answer. Instead, I got dressed, brushed my hair, dabbed on a little lipstick. It wasn't about seeing them. I wasn't going. It was about dignity. About reminding myself that I still got to decide how I presented myself to the world, even if no one was looking. The lobby had a bowl of bruised apples and a carafe of coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard. I took an apple and slipped it into my bag. Checked out. The man behind the counter barely looked up from his football recap. Outside, it was cold and clean. The wind had calmed. The sky was the kind of brittle blue that only happens in November. Sharp. High. Endless. I didn't go back to the airport right away. Instead, I walked. There was something I needed to do first. A mile down the road, tucked between a gas station and a closed tire shop, was a little postal annex. I stepped inside and asked for an envelope and a pen. "Do you sell stamps?" I asked. "Of course," said the clerk. She was young, kind-eyed, with chipped polish on her nails. "I need one for a letter to Massachusetts," I said. She handed it over, and I wrote the address from memory. Emma Wexler, 12. Pond Hollow Lane, Worcester, MA00609, my granddaughter. Emma was Greg's daughter from his first marriage, the only one who still called me just to talk. She was 23 now, finishing nursing school. She sent me pictures of her cat, told me when she passed exams, asked for my recipe for cornbread stuffing. The envelope stayed empty for a moment. Then I pulled out a page from my notebook and began writing. Emma, dear, you once told me I was your safe place. I want you to know that hearing that meant more to me than most things in this world. This Thanksgiving didn't go as planned. I flew across the country for a table I was never meant to sit at. But I found something in the quiet that I didn't expect. Room to remember who I am without waiting for someone else to say it first. I kept writing. Not bitter, not dramatic, just real. When I sealed the envelope, I felt lighter. At 10:35, I booked a ticket home. Same airline, same gate, different woman boarding. The flight wasn't until evening, so I found a cafe near the terminal with big windows and good scones. I sat there for hours with tea and a pen, going over things that had been unspoken too long. I didn't write to Greg. I didn't call Madeline. I didn't tell them where I was. They'd see the missed return call, maybe wonder, maybe not. I wasn't angry. I was done. Around 4 p.m., the light changed. The kind of golden haze that makes even parking lots look beautiful. I watched a little boy run toward a minivan, his backpack bouncing. He turned and waved at his grandmother, who was slower but smiling. She waved back, and he ran to her, grabbing her hand like it was his anchor. I watched them until they disappeared, and I whispered to myself, not loud, not bitter, just clear. I deserved that too. The plane home was only half full. A blessing, really. I had a whole row to myself. The seat beside the window was cold when I sat down, and I left it that way. Didn't bother folding my coat or smoothing the seatbelt across my lap just yet. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to make myself tidy for anyone else's comfort. The flight attendant offered a soft smile. "Heading home or leaving it?" she asked as she placed a plastic cup of water on my tray. "Both," I said. "In a way." She didn't ask for more, just nodded and moved on. That quiet kind of understanding, uncommon and kind. I stared out the window during takeoff, watching the gray city shrink beneath us, watching the runways crisscross like faded scars. As the plane lifted, the sky opened wider. Blue above and below, and nothing in between except the dull hum of the engines and my own breathing. I thought I might feel grief again, some wave of it. I waited for it like one waits for turbulence, but it didn't come. I didn't feel peace either, not yet. But I did feel still, rooted, present. That was new. Halfway through the flight, I pulled my phone from my bag and turned it on again. I told myself I was only checking the time. But of course the notifications poured in. 4 texts from Greg. 1 voicemail. "Mom, I'm really sorry. Please call me. The kids were asking where you were. Madeline said she thought you knew we moved dinner up a day. Can we talk?" I didn't open the voicemail. I didn't delete it either. Let it sit. Let it wait the way I had waited. I switched the phone off again. When we landed, it was already dark. My little city glowed in a way that was quiet and familiar. The shuttle driver who took me back to the parking lot was an older man with a twinkle in his eye. He asked if I'd been visiting family, and I smiled and said, "Not exactly." At home, my porch light was still on. I had left it on out of habit, as if expecting to return tired and full and folded into the warmth of family. Instead, I walked in with pie crumbs in my bag and a mind sharper than it had been in years. My house smelled like lavender and old wood. The radiator kicked on with a comforting clank. I set down my suitcase and hung up my coat. I moved slowly, not from age but from intention. I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd hosted years of Thanksgivings, where Greg once spilled gravy and Emma once cut snowflakes from napkins, where Madeline had sat, tight-lipped, looking at her phone more than my face. I looked around the room like it belonged to someone I was still meeting. Then I opened the drawer next to the fridge. That drawer, the one with the files, the one labeled Greg and Emma and legal. I pulled out Greg's folder. It was thick. Receipts, copies of checks, printouts of tuition assistance, an invoice from a mechanic I'd helped him pay when his transmission failed, the mortgage co-signing from 2010, the private preschool deposit I fronted for Ruby, with a note in Madeline's handwriting. "We'll pay you back after the bonus hits." They never did. I turned each page carefully, like tending to wounds, not in anger, not even in sadness, in clarity. Then I reached for the thinner folder labeled Emma. Birthday cards, photos she'd mailed me, a printout of her college graduation announcement, handwritten notes in bubbly ink, a thank you for helping her cover a course fee, a postcard from Vermont. "Wish you were here. Fall is wild and wonderful." I closed both folders and sat back. Then I reached for my notebook. And this time, I didn't write feelings. I wrote a plan. The next morning, I was at the bank before the doors even opened. A light frost coated the steps, making them slick, but I climbed them slowly and steadily, wearing my oldest boots and that same navy cardigan. The cardigan didn't match my scarf, but I no longer cared about appearances. I cared about action. The teller, a young man with kind eyes and a nervous smile, greeted me with the kind of politeness people reserve for the elderly. "Good morning, Mrs. Wexler. How can we help you today?" "I'd like to speak with someone about my accounts," I said. "All of them." He nodded, glanced at a screen, then called into the back. A few minutes later, I was ushered into a glass-walled office with soft chairs and the faint smell of printer ink. A woman named Natalie introduced herself as my account manager. She looked like someone who did yoga at lunch and always had almonds in her purse. "What can I do for you today, Mrs. Wexler?" "I want to suspend all automatic payments, every one of them, starting today." She blinked. "All of them." "Yes." She tapped a few keys, eyebrows rising slightly as she scanned the screen. "You have quite a few. Recurring transfers to family members, tuition payments, car insurance, some scheduled gifts to charities as well." "Keep the charities," I said. "Stop the rest." There was a long pause. "Do you want to talk about why?" I looked at her. Really looked. And to her credit, she didn't fill the silence with fake concern. "No," I said. "I've already spent enough time explaining myself." She nodded. "Understood." While she worked, I sat in the quiet of that office and watched the world move outside the window. A mother wrangling a toddler into a car seat. An older man pushing a walker. A delivery truck idling too long. "Done," Natalie finally said. "Everything's been suspended. I'll prepare the paperwork for full cancellation if you want to come back in to sign tomorrow." "I will." She hesitated. "There's also a power of attorney on file. Gregory Wexler. Do you still want him to have access?" I felt my pulse slow, not rise. "No," I said. "Revoke it." "Understood." She printed the form, and I signed it with steady hands. By the time I left the bank, the frost had melted. I didn't rush. I stopped at the bakery on the corner, bought myself a fresh roll, and walked the long way home. It wasn't about punishing Greg. Not really. It was about drawing a line where I hadn't before, about recognizing that love doesn't grow from sacrifice alone. It needs light. It needs truth. Back home, I pulled the pie dish from the sink, washed it gently, and put it away. Maybe someday I'd make another pie. Maybe not. But I wouldn't make one for people who left me standing on a curb. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. Mr. Altman had handled our affairs for over 30 years. He'd helped us buy the house, settle my husband's will, even draft the first version of mine back in 2005. His voice was warm but cautious. "Mrs. Wexler, what can I do for you?" "I'd like to make changes to my estate," I said. "And I want to establish a trust." "For Emma?" "Yes." He didn't ask why. He didn't have to. People like Mr. Altman have seen every version of family disappointment that exists. We set a time for the next day. When I hung up, I felt no triumph, no victory, just clarity. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and tea cooling on the railing. A few neighbors passed by. One waved. One didn't. The street was quiet, and I felt not okay, not healed, but steady. Like I'd finally stopped knocking on a door that was never going to open. The next morning, the sky was soft and low, that pale winter gray that wraps around the houses like gauze. I dressed slowly, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to rush what came next. At 9 sharp, I was in Mr. Altman's office, a little 2-story building with green shutters and a reception area that smelled faintly of old paper and floor polish. The same gold-framed photos hung where they always had. His children, his boat, his bulldog in a Santa hat. He stood when I entered, still as polite as he was 20 years ago. "Mrs. Wexler," he said, extending a hand. "It's good to see you." "And you, Mr. Altman." We sat in his office, same leather chairs, same ticking wall clock, same stack of forms on his desk, though now his reading glasses were thicker and his mustache had gone from salt and pepper to snow white. "What are we changing today?" he asked gently. "My will," I said, "and I want to create a trust. Everything I own, every cent, every asset, I want it protected, and I want it to go to Emma. Only Emma." He didn't blink, just nodded and pulled out a legal pad. "I assume we're removing Gregory and Madeline?" "Yes. They've had enough from me, more than enough." He looked up at that, but didn't comment. "I want it airtight," I continued. "No back doors, no loopholes. Emma is the beneficiary. She gets everything when I'm gone. And until then, she can access the trust for education, housing, healthcare, or emergencies. I'll decide what counts as an emergency." Altman smiled a little. "You've thought this through." "I have." "And your home? Your pension account? The CDs?" "All of it. If it has my name, it moves to the trust." "Understood. And you want to retain full control while living, of course." "Exactly." He leaned back. "Emma's a good girl, always was." I felt something in my throat tighten. She's the only one who still sees me as a person, not a purse. Mr. Altman didn't flinch at the bitterness in my voice. "Then let's make sure your wishes are honored." For the next hour, we worked through every item. He asked questions. I gave firm answers. No more uncertainty. No more benefit of the doubt. When we reached the end, he gathered the papers into a folder and looked at me with something close to admiration. "I'll have the final draft ready in a few days," he said. "We'll get it notarized, and it'll be done." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. Outside, the air had turned crisp. I walked home slowly, stopping once to buy a small poinsettia at the florist. I didn't decorate much anymore, but I wanted something bright on the kitchen table. Something alive. The moment I stepped through the door, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Grandma? It was Emma. Her voice, breathy, nervous, warm. I got your letter. I sat down at the kitchen table. You did? I I didn't know what happened. Dad and Madeline said you canceled your flight last minute. They made it sound like you just changed your mind. Of course they did. I was there, I said softly. I landed. I waited. I saw the photos. Emma went quiet. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I had no idea. I know, sweetheart. That's not on you. I should have called. I should have checked. You didn't know. You're not the one who made that choice. She sniffled on the other end. I missed you so much that day. It didn't feel right without you. For the first time since the airport, tears stung behind my eyes, but they didn't fall. Not this time. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. There was a silence between us. Not awkward. Just full. Grandma, she said finally, can I come visit next weekend? I have a break from classes. I'll take the train. My heart bloomed with something gentle and painful. Of course, I said. The guest room is ready. I'll bring the chessboard, she said. You still play? I never stopped. We hung up a few minutes later. I sat there at the table, hand still resting on the phone. For once, I didn't feel forgotten. I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. That Saturday, just after noon, I stood at the train station in my warmest coat, watching as passengers stepped off the 1137 from Worcester. The platform smelled like diesel and old rain. I clutched the paper bag in my hands, a sandwich and an apple, just in case she'd forgotten to eat. And then there she was. Emma came off the train wearing an oversized hoodie and jeans, her dark curls tucked under a beanie, a worn canvas bag slung over one shoulder. She looked older than the last time I'd seen her, sharper somehow. But when she spotted me, her face lit up with something pure and unmistakable. She rushed over and hugged me like she meant it. It was that simple. No questions, no apologies, no tension curling in the air between us. Just her arms around me, tight and real. Hi, Grandma, she whispered into my shoulder. Hi, baby, I said. You're here. We drove home in silence for a while. She watched the streets like she was trying to memorize them again. I drove slowly, carefully, letting her take it in. The neighborhood hadn't changed much, but it felt different with her beside me. Back at the house, I made tea while she set her bag down in the guest room. She returned with that familiar ease of someone who belonged, curling up in the corner of the couch like she'd never left. The chessboard sat waiting on the coffee table. We played a game. She won. Then we played another. I won that one. Fair and square. Later, we sat at the kitchen table, both of us nursing mugs of tea. The poinsettia I'd bought earlier that week sat in the middle, still red, still alive. I read your letter again on the train, she said, tracing the rim of her mug. I've never seen you write like that before. I've never had to, I said. I used to think being quiet was a form of grace, but lately, I think it's just made me easy to ignore. Emma looked up at me. I never ignored you. I know. She hesitated. Dad doesn't know I'm here. I figured. He called a couple nights ago, asked if I'd seen you since Thanksgiving. I didn't lie. I just said we hadn't talked yet. That was kind. She shook her head. It wasn't kindness. It was exhaustion. I'm tired of pretending things are normal. That surprised me. Emma had always been careful, diplomatic, the peacekeeper in her fragmented family. Hearing her say that, calm, steady, told me she was growing into something strong. You don't have to pretend here, I said. Not ever. She nodded. Neither do you. We sat in silence, just sipping our tea. And for the first time in weeks, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need Greg or Madeline to grovel or explain or spin another story about what went wrong. I didn't need a text or a voicemail or a too-late invitation. I had this. My house, my tea, my granddaughter. I had myself. That evening, Emma offered to make dinner. She cooked pasta with garlic and spinach, and I grated cheese while we talked about everything and nothing. We watched a silly movie afterward and laughed too hard at parts that weren't really that funny. Before bed, she sat beside me on the couch and said, "Grandma, I don't want to lose you." "You won't? Promise?" "I can't promise forever," I said, "but I'm not going anywhere yet." She smiled, then hugged me again, gentler this time, but no less real. After she went to sleep, I sat in the quiet of the living room, the clock ticking like a slow metronome behind me. I looked around at the pictures on the mantel. Some faces had faded. Some frames were empty now, but one picture still stood tall. Me, holding Emma as a baby. My hair darker then, my face softer, but the grip of my hands around her tiny body just as steady. I looked at it a long time. Then I got up, turned off the light, and went to bed. Emma left Sunday afternoon. We lingered on the porch for a while before her train. I handed her a container of leftover pasta, a folded scarf I'd knitted last winter, and a quiet kind of love I didn't need to explain. She kissed my cheek and promised to call Tuesday. Then she was gone, a quick wave from the back window of the train, her breath fogging the glass. I stood there until the train had shrunk to nothing, then went back inside. The house felt quieter than usual, but not in a lonely way. It was the kind of silence that follows after something important has been said. A silence with shape and weight. I moved through the rooms slowly, picking up mugs, folding the blanket from the couch, placing the chessboard back on the shelf. When I reached the kitchen, I opened the drawer again. The files sat where I left them. Greg's folder still thick with paper. Emma's still light. But it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about me. I pulled out a yellow notepad and began listing everything I'd paid for over the last 15 years. Not just money given directly, but things I'd quietly covered. Home repairs, medical deductibles, legal fees. When Greg left his first wife, the down payment for their second car. Groceries when Madeline was too tired to shop. School fundraisers I'd been guilted into supporting with a check instead of a visit. Line by line, I wrote them down. By the time I finished, the list stretched over 4 pages. It was strange. I hadn't thought of myself as generous, just useful, reliable. Someone who helped because that's what mothers do. That's what I did. But looking at the numbers, I saw it clearly. I'd subsidized their life. And in return, they gave me politeness. Hollow birthdays, tired smiles. A chair near the coat rack when there was no room at the main table. I wasn't angry, not really. I was just done. At 3:17 p.m., my phone rang. Greg's name on the screen. I didn't pick up. A minute later, a voicemail, then a text. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in. Hope everything's okay. Let me know when you're free to talk." No urgency. No specifics. Just a vague nudge, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't left me standing at the curb in another city while he carved turkey and took family photos I wasn't meant to see. I deleted the voicemail without listening. The text I left unread. That night, I lit a candle. It wasn't for any special occasion, just for stillness. for the quiet of the house and the way the light caught the edge of the kitchen counter. I poured myself a glass of wine, one of the good bottles I'd been saving for a real holiday. I set a single place at the table, heated a bowl of leftover soup, and I sat, not scrolling, not waiting, not hoping for the phone to ring. I sat in my own life. Later, before bed, I opened my email, found the folder labeled Travel. At the bottom was the receipt for my Thanksgiving flight. Round trip. Return complete. I forwarded it to myself, then added a note in the subject line. Proof of departure and return. No rescue, no reunion, just me. I didn't send it to anyone else. I didn't need to. The next morning, I called Mr. Altman again. I've been thinking, I told him. I want to add a clause to the trust. Of course, he said. What are you thinking? I want Emma to be the sole executor, but I also want a letter attached, not a legal one, a personal one. You can include a statement of intent, he said. It won't change the legality, but it can explain your reasons. Good. Then I'll write it. That same morning, I sat down and began. To whoever is reading this after I'm gone, if you're wondering why things were divided this way, let me say clearly, this is not punishment, it's honesty. I've spent my life giving, quietly, consistently. But love without respect isn't love. Presence without care isn't family. I chose the one person who saw me before I vanished. I didn't finish the letter that day. I didn't need to rush. Some things deserve to be written slow. Tuesday came and went without a call from Emma, not because she forgot, but because we'd agreed on it. She had clinicals that week and didn't want to be distracted. I'll call Friday, she'd said. After my shift. Same time. I trusted her. That morning, though, someone else did call. Madeline. Her name lit up my screen like a warning sign, all bright letters and bad timing. I let it ring out. Then, 30 seconds later, the text arrived. Hi, Irene. Hope you're well. Greg mentioned you've been hard to reach lately. Let's catch up soon? No punctuation where it mattered. No warmth where it counted. Catch up? We weren't old co-workers. We weren't neighbors who borrowed sugar once. I'd been her mother-in-law for almost 15 years. I'd helped her find her first real job after Ruby was born. I'd sent her care baskets when she had her gallbladder out. I'd paid for her mother's funeral flowers when their budget was too tight. Catch up? I set the phone down without replying. Later that afternoon, as if on cue, another message arrived. This one from Greg. Mom, Madeline tried calling. We're starting to get worried. Can you just let us know you're okay? The irony of it. They left me at an airport, but now they were worried. Not when I was standing with my suitcase and no pickup. Not when I was walking to a diner with frozen fingers. Not when they posted a photo that said everyone with their arms around each other and no seat left for me. But now, when silence echoed back to them, they panicked. Silence is powerful. It unnerves the people who are used to your noise, your giving, your yes. I kept the phone off for the rest of the day. That evening, I went through the attic. Not for any dramatic reason. Just to find an old recipe book Emma had once asked about, the one with my apple crisps scribbled in the margins. I hadn't been up there in years. The boxes smelled of dust and old pine, and the insulation curled like forgotten paper. In one box, labeled 1990-2005, I found the book. And beneath it, letters. Dozens of them. Cards from Greg as a teenager, drawings from Emma as a child, thank you notes from friends and cousins long moved away. A photo of my husband in his Sunday suit, holding a pumpkin pie like it was a prize. I sat down on the floor, cross-legged, and let the past rest in my lap. So many pieces of myself I'd stored away to make room for others. I thought about Greg as a little boy, how he used to insist on sleeping with his head against my chest because your heart is louder than the rain, how he'd cry if I left for work too early, how I taught him to tie his shoes with 2 loops instead of 1 because it made more sense to him. I had loved him so completely once. Maybe I still did. But love doesn't excuse neglect, and forgiveness doesn't mean return, not always. I put the letters back carefully, closed the box. And that night, when the house was dark and the world was quiet, I opened the notebook and added 2 more lines to the letter for the trust. I didn't want my final act to be polite. I wanted it to be clear. Emma, you saw me. Not out of obligation, not for what I gave, but because you chose to. That's what family is. Choice, respect, truth. The pen felt heavier than usual in my hand, but I wrote anyway. The next day, I drove into town and went straight to the notary. It was in the back of a shipping store, past shelves of bubble wrap and a rack of novelty greeting cards. The man behind the counter had kind hands and a long, careful way of speaking. His name tag said Dev. I need to notarize a letter, I said, unfolding the pages I'd written, and some trust documents my attorney prepared. He glanced at the first page, then back at me. Big changes? I nodded. Long overdue ones. He didn't ask more, just handed me a pen and guided me through each signature with the quiet efficiency of someone who has seen all kinds of endings and beginnings pass across his counter. When it was done, I felt lighter. Not free, not yet, but clearer. Like the road ahead had fewer turns. I stopped by the grocery store after, picked up milk and oranges, a bunch of lilacs they'd marked half price. The kind of things you buy when life is steady again. When you're choosing your own peace, instead of waiting for someone else to hand it to you. At home, I set the flowers in the chipped vase near the kitchen sink. The scent of lilac spread slowly through the house, soft and certain. I took off my coat, folded it, and laid it over the back of the chair. My phone buzzed just as I was putting the groceries away. Greg. Again. Mom, we really need to talk. You're not answering, and it's making things worse. I don't know what's going on, but we're worried. Please call me. The message was longer than usual. The edges of panic showing. But still, no real apology. No mention of what had happened. No ownership. Only absence. And now, the discomfort of it. He wasn't sorry for forgetting me. He was sorry I had stopped filling in the blanks. I sat down, stared at the screen, then turned it off again. That afternoon, I took out the folders once more, Greg's, Emma's, the trust packet, and locked them all in my fireproof box. Slid it back beneath the bed. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I was finished. Finished explaining. Finished asking. Finished waiting. I made soup that night. Lentils, carrots, garlic. My hands still knew how to measure by instinct. I cooked for one, not for absence. I set the table, not in mourning, but in ritual. In respect. For myself. The soup was good. Later, I sat on the porch again, wrapped in a shawl, the air just brisk enough to feel like something shifting. And as the streetlights clicked on one by one, I remembered a moment I hadn't thought about in years. Greg was 10. He'd come home from school with a split lip and mud on his jeans. Another boy had shoved him in the field during recess. He didn't cry, just stood at the sink, rinsing the blood off his hands, saying, "It's fine. It's nothing." I had crouched beside him and said, "You're allowed to be hurt. It doesn't make you weak." I wish someone had said that to me, because I had been hurt. Quietly, consistently, for years. and I had let it go unchecked because I thought endurance was a virtue. But it's not. Not always. Sometimes it's just delay. Sometimes it's just the cost of silence. I sipped my tea slowly, let the night press in. The flowers in the kitchen swayed slightly in a draft, a blur of violet in the dark. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. A car pulled into a driveway. Someone laughed, sharp and high, a sound from another life. And I sat in mine. No questions, no waiting, just the weight of my own belonging, finally whole. It was late Friday afternoon when the knock came. I was folding laundry at the kitchen table, towels mostly, still warm from the dryer, when I heard it. 3 slow raps. Not the mailman, not a neighbor. The kind of knock that carries hesitation behind it. I opened the door, and there she was. Madeline. Her hair was too perfect, like it had been brushed and sprayed in the car. She wore heels too narrow for our sidewalks and carried a tote bag slung over one shoulder. Her face bore that curated expression I'd come to know, part concern, part performance. "Irene," she said, her voice almost tender. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer at first, just stepped aside and let her in. She glanced around as she entered, as if expecting dust or neglect. The house looked the same, but something in the air had shifted. I knew it, and I think she did too. I led her to the living room. She didn't sit until I did. She placed her tote carefully at her feet and folded her hands in her lap. "I know you're upset," she began, her tone already polished. "And I just want to say, this whole thing has been a huge misunderstanding." I said nothing. She continued. "Greg really thought your flight was Friday. That's what he told me. We didn't realize you had already landed." "And the photo?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "The Thanksgiving photo. The caption that said full house. All of you smiling at the table." She looked down. That was just something I posted for the holiday. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did." She looked up again, too quickly. "Well, yes, but I think we need to move past that now. The kids miss you. Greg's been calling. We're all just concerned. You've shut us out." I let out a small breath. "No, I just stopped filling in the silence for you. That's different." Her mouth tightened. "I came here because we want to make things right." I looked at her then, really looked, at the effort behind her makeup, at the impatience hiding in her posture, at the avoidance she wore like perfume. "You didn't come to make things right," I said. "You came to see if I was still useful." She straightened. "That's not fair." "But it's true." She glanced toward the hallway, as if Greg might appear and rescue her from this conversation. "I've given enough," I said calmly. "More than enough. And I've decided where the rest of it goes." That got her attention. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm not bitter. I'm simply finished." "Irene," she said, and now her voice was tighter, colder. "This isn't like you." "I know," I said. "It's like me now." There was a pause. She shifted in her seat. "Does Greg know you've made changes?" "I imagine he's starting to suspect." Her face faltered. "And the house? Your accounts?" "Taken care of." The silence after that was dense, a kind of reckoning. Finally, she reached for her tote and stood. "Well," she said, her tone now clipped. "I'm sorry you feel this way." I smiled, just a little. "No, you're sorry I stopped accepting less than I deserved." She didn't reply, just turned and walked to the door. At the threshold, she hesitated. "Greg really is worried." "He should be," I said. "Not because I'm gone, but because I'm not coming back." The door closed behind her with the softest click. I stood there for a long moment, my hand on the knob, the air still humming from the exchange. Then I went back to the kitchen, finished folding the towels, lit a candle, made a cup of tea. The phone rang once that evening. Greg again. I let it ring, not out of cruelty, but because the silence finally belonged to me. Saturday came quiet. I woke early, not because I had to, but because my body had settled into a rhythm again, one not governed by expectation or the noise of someone else's schedule. The sky outside was pale and soft, the kind of morning that doesn't press or promise anything, just presence. I took my tea to the porch and sat under the faded quilt I kept draped over the back of the wicker chair. The steam rose slowly from the cup. Somewhere down the street, a child shouted, followed by the roll of a skateboard. Winter was still holding back, but not for long. I thought about Madeline's visit. Not with regret, not with anger, just curiosity. As if I were watching someone else remember a conversation they'd never truly had. She hadn't come for peace. She came for control. And for the first time in a long time, I hadn't given it. That was the victory. Not in winning, not in being right, but in staying rooted. In no longer performing grace just to keep others comfortable. That afternoon, Emma called. Her voice came bright through the receiver. "Hi, Grandma. I'm on break, but I wanted to check in. How's your week been?" "Eventful," I said, sipping my second cup of tea. "But steady." She caught the tone. "Something happened?" Madeline stopped by. "Oh." She said she and Greg wanted to make things right. Did they? "No." Emma exhaled through her teeth. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." I wasn't surprised. But I wasn't shaken either. There was a pause on her end. Then she said quietly, "You sound different." "Do I?" "Stronger. I think I am." We talked for a while. About her patients. About a paper she was writing. About the cat who'd knocked over her favorite lamp. The everyday things that form real lives. When we hung up, I didn't feel that familiar ache of absence. I felt connected, present, full. Later, I spent the afternoon going through the drawers in the spare room. Not out of urgency, but because I felt ready to decide what mattered. I found a set of linens I hadn't used in years. Emma might like those. A pair of earrings I'd once saved for Ruby's 16th birthday, before I learned gifts from me stayed unopened in drawers or disappeared altogether. I held the earrings a long time. Silver. Simple. Classic. I had bought them when Ruby was still a baby, imagining the moment she'd stand in front of a mirror, tucking them into her ears before a school dance. But now, they felt like symbols of something that was never mine to hold. I set them aside. Not bitterly, just finally. That evening, I wrote in my notebook again. Not a letter this time, just a list. Things I no longer owed. Explanations. Second chances to people who waste first ones. Apologies for taking up space. A seat at a table that won't make room. Silence. And then, beside it, I wrote another list. Things I still have. My name, my peace, my mind, my home, my granddaughter's voice in my ear saying, "Stronger." I tore the page out and folded it in half, taped it to the back of the cabinet door beneath the sink, where only I would see it, where I kept the dish gloves and the extra sponges. A strange place for strength, but real. That night, I set the table for one again, but this time, I lit 2 candles. Not because anyone else was coming, but because I was there. Fully. I sat down, spooned out my soup, and whispered. Not for drama, not for pain, but because it needed to be said. I'm still here. And I was. I spent the first Sunday of December decorating the porch. Nothing elaborate, just a simple pine wreath with a red ribbon and 2 strings of warm white lights along the railing. I didn't do it for neighbors or nostalgia. I did it because I wanted the house to glow. For me. For once. Inside, I put on a kettle, turned on the old radio, and let the slow jazz drift through the rooms. I used to decorate for the kids. Stockings with their names, cookies shaped like stars, and the old felt angel Emma once made in kindergarten. But this year, there would be no stockings, no extra chairs, no waiting. This year, I lit the fire early and set one place for tea. My own. By the time the sun dipped behind the houses across the street, the phone rang. It was Greg again. I answered this time. "Mom?" His voice was thinner than I remembered. "I'm here," I said. Calm. Steady. There was a pause. "I didn't think you'd pick up." "I know." Another pause. Longer. "I saw the paperwork," he said finally. "From the attorney, the trust, the changes. I figured you would." His breath caught, like he'd expected a different tone. I don't understand. After everything." "Exactly," I interrupted. "After everything." He went quiet. "You mean the money," he said eventually. "I mean the pattern," I replied. "The forgetting, the late calls, the missing birthdays, the airport, the photo. That wasn't intentional." "No," I said. "It was worse. It was convenient." There it was. The truth, out loud, without apology. "You're punishing us," he said. But it came out less like an accusation and more like a hope that I might deny it. Reassure him. Fold. "No," I said. "I'm releasing myself. From obligation. From old loyalties that only moved in one direction. From the guilt I'd carried so long, I'd forgotten what lightness felt like." "I never thought it would come to this," he muttered. "I know." His voice broke. "We're still your family." "No, Greg. I was your family. You haven't been mine in a long time." And with that, we ended. Not with shouting, not with resolution. Just with a truth said quietly enough to echo for years. I hung up, stood at the window and watched the street lamp flicker on. The next day, I mailed a small package to Emma. Inside, the silver earrings, wrapped in soft cloth, a copy of the trust, and a note. "These are yours, not because you asked, but because you showed up. Wear them when you feel uncertain. You're never invisible in this house. Not then, not now, not ever." She called 3 days later, crying and laughing at once. "Grandma," she said, voice trembling, "I don't know what to say." "You already did," I said. "The day you asked if you could come visit. The day you came without needing a reason. That night, I lit the fireplace and sat in its warmth. Outside, the street was quiet, dusted with the season's first snow. I watched it fall through the window, slow and clean. And I thought about all the Thanksgivings that had come before. The ones I cooked through pain. The ones I sat through quietly. The ones I was invited to as an afterthought. And then this one, the one I gave myself. No carving knives, no tablecloths, no second helpings. Just a walk, a diner, a slice of pie, and the clearest thing I'd ever tasted. Not bitterness, but freedom. And if you're reading this, if you've ever waited for someone who forgot to wait for you, listen close. You can stop now. You can light a candle for yourself. You can buy your own damn pie. And you can begin again. Right here. Right now. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. Your silence has value. Your seat is your own, and you don't need permission to keep it.